up, you guys, and welcome back to my channel. I am Ro if you are new, and if you're not, thank you for returning. So maybe back in February I did a budgeting video. I'm gonna put it somewhere on the screen. It was very beginner friendly, and since that video my budget has changed a little bit, and honestly I have put myself on a tighter budget, and I have begun to add some more technical things into my budget. I created a spreadsheet for my budget. Usually I would budget on paper, but I wanted to track my money a little bit better than I had been, along with the tips and just the other things that I have implemented into like my budgeting routine. So I did create a budget scenario where I'm gonna take someone's income and budget off of that. I wanted to take someone else's lifestyle and kind of show you guys how I utilize my spreadsheet and kind of budget there. So I'm going to do a walkthrough with you guys of how I would take someone else's income and insert it into the spreadsheet. But yeah, we're going to get into that more so towards the end of the video. But before we get into that, of course, I have my notes. Some of these are kind of lessons learned and kind of tips that I thought would help. I do want to say that I think it's best to watch my first video because I'm going to be kind of piggybacking off of that video in this one. So if you haven't watched that first video, I actually watched it back myself, so I won't be reiterating some things. I would encourage you to pause this one, watch that one, and then come back to this one because that one is really detailed, and I think I did a pretty good job on that one. The first thing I have is, if you're budgeting from your current balance, I'll say wait 1 or 3 days to allow the pending charges to actually be credited to your account. Once those pending charges have gone through, then create your budget. And I say to do that to make sure you're operating off the correct amount of money. One thing that I started doing is utilizing the features that come with online banking. I've recently just started using them. It's things like setting goals, setting scheduled transfers. You can set a budget within your online banking if there's something that you want to do. You can do bill pay. Definitely utilize and become familiar with the features that come with your online banking. The next tip I have is to check your email and actually have an email. Like, it's very important to have a paper trail when it comes to your money. So have a set email where your invoices come, your receipts come, because a lot of things are paperless now. So make sure you are active with your emails. My next point is to pay within days of receiving your monthly statement. Usually your monthly statement comes to your email. If you are really into like the paperless thing, which is kind of the thing these days, you'll know about it in your email before you know about it through mail. And for me, once I receive my monthly statement, usually I pay like as soon as I see the statement or within days of seeing the statement. So I jot down what day I typically receive my statements, and depending on how expensive the bill is, I could pay it within a couple days or whatever. And that also kind of leads me into my next point of setting up automatic payments for my least expensive bills. Expenses that are less than like $75. I just go ahead and hit auto pay on those because for me, I'm easily forgetful. This actually happened to me recently. I saw the monthly statement for my internet bill, and at the time it wasn't in auto pay, and I thought I paid it. And usually when I see the statement, I just go ahead and pay it, and I thought I did, and I actually put in my budget that I paid it, and I didn't, and it ended up being late. Not because I didn't have the money, but I forgot to pay it. Like, I looked at it and was like, oh, I'm gonna pay it today, and I didn't return to the email. So even if I have like a calendar reminder of, okay, you need to pay this bill, sometimes I still forget. So I think it's very important for those least expensive bills that I do auto pay. My next tip is to find out the due date for every single bill. I think I kind of hit on it in my first video, but I didn't kind of emphasize it. But I think it's very important that you find out when your bills are due, and then set your own due date for those bills and follow your due date, not the company's due date, yours. Going with the company due date, I feel like it's kind of a risk, especially if you're in a money bind at the time. And after that, you can go ahead and put that bill in your calendar based off the due date that you set. You can have it repeated monthly, so you don't even have to go and put that bill in every single month. You can just have it to repeat monthly on that set date, alerted for 2 days prior, a day prior, also the day of if you are like me and you're forgetful. So I mainly do that with my expensive bills, but for my least expensive bills, I do still put them in my calendar, but I don't have like reminders set like days before. I have it set for the day of, just so I know that on this day, this money is coming out of my account. And for those least expensive bills, of course, I have to go based on the company's due date, because that's when they're going to process it out of my account. So this particular tip is based on if you are creating a budget for something. Say you want to create a budget on how much you should spend on eating out a month. So what I would do is take the previous month's statement from your bank and calculate how much you spent on eating out that previous month and decide whether or not that's excessive, or if you want to cap it at that number, or if you feel like you could eat out more, you have the space to eat out more. Whatever the case may be, review your last month budget and decide from there what you want to do. Like I mentioned in the last point, keep a paper trail for everything. Make sure that you're receiving invoices, those monthly statements, receipts, issues. Have all those things sent to your email. If you don't, the companies, they can easily say they don't have a record of you paying that bill. They don't have a record of them sending this email. They can say that, and if you don't have a point to say that they do, then you may be losing out on some money or something. You never know. So keep a paper trail of everything, especially receipts. Piggybacking off of that, I would say to create folders in your email specifically for your invoices, your receipts, your statements, if you come up on an issue, so those important emails won't get lost in the crossfire of all the other emails you receive. And really quickly, I'm just gonna go through a few savings goals that I came up with. That's gonna be, have a minimal goal for your savings account, a number that you do not want to go below. Say for instance, your minimal is $2,000, but you end up saving $5,000 at the end of the year. You can take that $3,000 and invest it into the property that you want, the car, the business, whatever, but you don't allow yourself to go below that $2,000. Another thing, do not dip into your savings until you get to that minimum. Say for instance, your minimum goal is $2,000, but now you're at $1,300, but something's going on and you want to dip. Don't dip into your savings until you get to that mark. Don't dip into it. Moving off of that is to acquire an additional income that goes strictly to your savings. Find a side hustle that is specifically for your savings. The money goes straight into your savings account. For me, that's going to be my YouTube. I do not touch my YouTube money. My YouTube earnings are directly deposited into my savings account. If I ever get to a point where I'm making enough on YouTube where I can split it down the middle to save half and then put the other ones towards my expenses or just spending, I will do that. But at the time being, I ain't making enough of that. I just want it to be money that I don't see, that I don't worry about, and I could use it for something else in the future. Another thing is to increase my savings. Those end of the year holidays are typically when I'm spending the most or I'm traveling the most, but I feel like though I'm gonna be spending a lot, I wanna make sure that I am increasing my savings in those times as well. So me personally, I am gonna be increasing my savings. And I'm gonna leave off the savings portion of this video with like a cliffhanger question, which is, have a plan for your savings. I reached my minimum number in my savings, but what now? What am I gonna do with the money that I'm making beyond my minimum? What's the plan for it? So that's a question that I'm currently asking myself. I want the money beyond my minimal to be making money. So my next venture is going to be investments, and I will tell you more about that once I get more into it. But right now, I'm not doing any of that, but I will share that with you guys in due time. So I'm going to move on to my computer now. I'm going to have a screen recording so you guys can see exactly what I'm doing. So before I get into that portion, there's a very, very important question that I think everyone should ask themselves before they begin budgeting. Are you budgeting based upon savings, or are you budgeting based upon expenses? And that's going to make a whole lot more sense once we head over to my computer. So let's head over to my computer. All right, you guys, so we're at the portion where I'm going to be doing the budget walkthrough scenario with you guys. So let me just go ahead and tell you guys what the scenario is, and I'm going to put it on the screen as well. Carrie wants to save $5,000 next year. She makes $2,700 a month after taxes at her full-time job where she is paid every Friday. She also has a side hustle that generates a minimum of $250 a month. Her expenses are as follows. She pays $679 for rent, $200 that she budgeted for her student loans. Her car is $278. Her groceries, she's budgeted at $300. Internet and phone, $143. Gas, she budgeted at $120. Utilities, $67. Subscriptions, $47. So the first thing I'm gonna ask is her budget based on her expenses or is it based on her savings? And clearly it's based on her savings, considering that she started out with, she wants to save $5,000. The next question is, how much does she need to save each month in order to meet that goal? And we're going to divide 5,000 by 12. It comes out to be $416.66, but I'm going to round that up to $420. We're going to take that $420 and divide it by 4 so that we can know how much she needs to save on a weekly basis, which is roughly $105. I'm not going to round that number since I already rounded the 420. So $105 is how much she needs to save on a weekly basis. So before we get into it, I do want to explain the spreadsheet a little bit, just a quick run through. Whatever month and year you're budgeting for, that's where you will put at the top. On to this section, I'm gonna highlight it. The account standing basically is what is in that account the day that you're making this budget. Say for instance, you're starting out budgeted in the middle of the month. How much do you have in your expenses account, your spending account? How much is in your savings? End the month with this much in each account. So how much did you have at the beginning of your budget? How much did you have at the end? Moving on to the next one, which is income. What are your streams of income? Payroll, side hustle, babysitting. What are your streams of income? And you will put those here. And how many times a month do you receive that income? For instance, you get paid every Friday, so you would count the number of Fridays in a month, and that's the number of checks that you receive in that particular month. Next is going to be payroll split, or it can be income split. And this particular chart is going to make a little more sense as we get into the scenario. So basically, how are you splitting your checks? How much of your checks is going to your expenses? How much is going to your savings account? Then moving on to the savings one. For me, under this one, I would have payroll, YouTube, and whatever else I decide to put. Say for instance, I didn't spend that much money, so I want to take the money that I didn't spend and put it into my savings. I can say transfer and how much I transfer over. So you can also do an additional chart for your spending as well. I'm just not that into my spendings account. I haven't really delved into my spendings account just yet. But moving on to the expenses chart. So this is basically gonna be a list of all of your expenses, the things that you consider expenses. On here, I just put some basic things down: rent, utilities, phone, internet, tithes, charity, grocery, car, just some basic things. And I'm going to tweak this particular budget to fit with the scenario. And going over to explain the column headings, we got budget amount. So if you watched my last video, then you know I said it's best to round out your amount and round out each bill to a certain number. So that's what I mean by your budget amount. Okay, say for instance, your rent is actually $740. You probably want to budget for $750. So that is the number that you would put in the budget amount. But say for instance, that particular month you referred somebody to the apartment, so $300 got knocked off of your rent for that month. You will put the actual amount that you have to pay in that segment, which will calculate under the difference column. So say for instance, your budget amount was $750 and the actual that you paid was $450. The difference will show up in this column, which will be $300. Moving on to the due date and the date you actually pay. So what day was it due? What day did you actually pay? This other column is if that bill was early, on time, or late. And if you happen to pay a bill late and you want to remember why the bill was late, you can put a comment in that particular cell to explain why the bill was late. That's something that I do as well. So it also totals out at the bottom. Move on to the scenario and how we can look at it from here. Alright you guys, so I definitely went ahead and completed the spreadsheet, but I am going to kind of do a review for you guys of how I did it. So since I didn't know her account standing, I did not fill out that portion. And then moving on to the second chart, I broke down just how much she receives on a weekly basis. So I divided 2,700 by 4 and it came out to be $675. So her 4 checks for the month are $675 per check, which totals out to be her monthly income, which is $2,700. And these charts are already set to calculate this stuff, so let me just show you guys that real quick. If I take it out, the total is gone, but if once I put it back in, it multiplies that to that 675 times that 4 weeks, and it automatically multiplies it. And if she were to have some other incomes, I would definitely put those. But since she's on a budgeting goal, I did go ahead and apply her side hustle to be that income that goes strictly to her savings. So I didn't even include that in her income, just so she won't think that this is money that she can put towards any of her expenses or her spending. So I did not put that underneath. So let's move on to her savings. In order for her to reach her $5,000 goal, she has to save at least $416.66. But I did round it up to an even amount of $420. However, since I'm applying her minimal amount from her side hustle, to subtract that $250 from the $420 in order to find out how much she needs to save from her job to aid in that. So if she did not have a side hustle and her savings depended solely on her payroll, she would have to dedicate $105 to her savings account every week. But thankfully she has that side hustle that takes that burden off of her weekly payroll. So instead of her having to pay $105 a week from her weekly check, she only has to pay $420 minus $250, which is $170. Now we're going to take that number and divide it by 4 checks. It comes out to be $42.50. So instead of $42.50, I rounded her out to $50 per check is how much she needs to save to cover the remaining $170 that her side hustle does not cover for the amount that she needs to save every month. So if she saves $50 per check, which is $200 a month, plus her $250 that she makes in minimal, it said this is the minimum amount that she makes. There can very well be months where she doesn't have to put anything from her weekly check into her saving if her side hustle covers the full $420 that she has to. But with this budget of $50 per check and her side hustle, she can save beyond the $420, and she could save $450, which would mean at the end of the year she would save $5,400. And now I'm going to tell you guys how I came up with the number for the expenses and the spending accounts. So let's go down here to the expenses chart. So as you guys can see, these numbers do not match the numbers that were provided. However, again, I like to reiterate that I do like to over budget, which means I like to round up a number. Depending on how tight your money is, you may not want to round up too much, but I personally like to round. If I'm within $25 of the next 100, I definitely round to the nearest 100. I rounded her rent up to $700. Her student loans is the budget that she curated, so $200. Her phone and internet, I rounded up to $150. Her car, I rounded up to $300. Groceries, $300. Gas, $120. Utilities, I rounded to $80. and subscriptions I rounded to 50. If your money is a little more tight, you definitely don't have to round as much as I did, but to be on the safe side, I do like to over budget, so that way her account won't be on zero at the end of the month. Now boom, her expenses total to $1,900, roughly $1,900 a month based on the roundings that I did. So now that I know how much her expenses are a month, I'm able to see how much she needs to pay per week on her expenses. So I took that $1,900 and I divided it by 4 and I came out to $475. So in order for her to cover her expenses each month, she has to put $475 in her expense account for every check. So every week she has to put $475 in her expense account. So we did the savings, we've calculated the expenses. Now whatever is left over is her spending money. We know per check she's doing $50 plus that $475. So out of $675, $525 of that is taken up from her expenses and her savings. So what's left from that is $150. Since she has this savings goal, her spending account is just going to be sacrificed. So she's able to freely spend $600 a month. She's saving $200 and her expenses are $1,900. Now her expenses are pretty high. If she wants to have more money to spend, maybe she could cut out her subscriptions, watch how much she's using her utilities in her apartment, probably adjust how much she's spending in groceries. So, and just to show you guys what I mean for the other sections, for the actual amount and the difference amount, I'm gonna put the actual numbers that she used so you guys can see. So at the end of February, she should have at least $66 in her expense account, not overall in her expense account. So yeah, I think that kind of wraps everything up. I hope that I didn't explain this too confusing. And if you guys like the budgeting template, you feel like it would be a good fit for you and your budget, go ahead and leave your email down below, or you can hit me up in my email, which is accordingtoro@gmail.com, and let me know that you would like to receive the budgeting template. I'm more than happy to send it over to you. Let me know how it works for you, all of that good jazz. So if you would like the template, definitely leave your email below or hit me up in my email. Let me know if you guys want more financial based videos. Leave some ideas if you would like, and I'm happy to share the little information that I do know about money and how to handle it. My motto is, if you know how to budget a few hundred, you'll know how to budget a few thousand, million, billion. Before you leave, make sure you like, subscribe, and be sure to share it with a friend. We're on the way to 20K, so definitely make sure you subscribe, and I will see you guys in my next video.